So as the time of this video, it has now been a week since the news of the Skullgirls update, an update that featured various changes to its sprites, cutscenes, and even the concept art in its digital art compendium. The backlash has been pretty unexpected, yet definitely refreshing. People have been very vocal about how deleting an 11-year-old artwork, which was never a problem for the many years the game has been out, is in fact censorship, and how that will ultimately hurt the game going forward. With the game receiving the spot at this year's EVO competition, it seems as if this was the catalyst for this censorship, which proves my previous feelings that esports is to blame for this current push of safe designs in modern games. I've chimed in on this discussion with my 2 cents, as well as posted old videos covering the history of Lab Zero and the events that led to developers forcing out the original lead programmer and artist under questionable pretenses. The remaining staff has decided to work under the new name Future Club, which was, of course, picked up by Autumn Games. At the end of the thread, I stated that you should not harass the people involved in this situation, but voice your displeasure with the company and their actions. This is mainly aimed at those of us who had purchased the game back in 2013 and crowdfunded the game, and had enjoyed the game before the start of the censoring of our assets. It's not limited to people who were potentially interested in the game, but have been turned off by the act of censoring the game's content. On July 1st, I received a response to this particular thread from a Twitter user who had this to say.
Okay, but how do we do that? The team may have wanted to do this because they just weren't comfortable with the content. Illogical, I know, but some people don't see censorship as harm.
Good question. And honestly, the best we can do is get as many people informed as to why censoring the material is actually harmful to both the consumer and the product. So instead of just answering the tweet, I felt that it's important to put out a video with my thoughts on this exact thing. First of all, let's talk about the meaning of censorship, because this seems to be a misguided idea of what is and what isn't. By the ACLU's definition, censorship is the suppression of words or images or ideas that are offensive, which happens whenever people succeed in imposing their personal, political, or moral values on others. Censorship can be carried out by the government as well as private pressure groups. Censorship by the government, of course, is unconstitutional. Keeping this in mind, we see people on Twitter claiming that the censorship of content of this game is okay because the so-called developers of the game are the ones doing the censoring. This is wrong for 2 major reasons. 1, consumers who have invested in the development of the game via crowdfunding and the people who have purchased the game after initial launch did so under the impression that the so-called problematic content, which has currently been removed, was not an issue to them and was actually part of the reason why they were interested in purchasing the game in the first place. Things removed, such as fan service, quote-unquote racially charged content, and references to hate groups, were not enough to deter people from purchasing the game back in 2012 and were perfectly fine for years after the game's initial release, only to be toned down to be palatable within use for esports competition. 2. The current members of Future Club are in fact not the ones responsible for the generation of the game's original content. That would be Mike Zymont, Alex Ahad, and Zone, who are all no longer working with the company. That being the case, this is not even the original Reverge Labs team, and to a fault, it's not even Lab Zero doing the censoring of the content. It is current Future Club and Autumn Games, which are the ones making these changes. Whether they have the right to do so is also a moot point, considering the fact that the content that was removed or altered were part of crowdfunding stretch goals that the original backers have had for years before they were deleted in this current update. Because it's been years since the game's release, the excuse that may be given is that they are considering this version of the game to be a reboot in order to justify the changes. But the fact of the matter is, the company has decided to retroactively alter content that has been purchased for the customer, which one would imagine would fall into bait and switch territory. The following definition of bait and switch is from Cornell Law School's website.
A bait and switch takes place when a seller creates an appealing but ingenuine offer to sell a product or service, which the seller does not actually intend to sell. This initial advertised offer is the bait. Then the seller switches customers from buying the advertised product or service that the seller initially offered into buying a different product or service that is usually at a higher price or has some other advantageous effect to the advertiser. This is the switch. Normally, The switched product that the consumer buys is usually at a higher purchase price, an increased profit for the seller, or may have a less marketable characteristic than the product advertised.
Taking this into account, the product that was advertised was enticing and appealing to the original crowdfunding audience as well as the people who had purchased the game later on, and the censoring of the content has altered the product into a different product that was what was promised to both the original backers and the customers who had purchased the game. The game's changes, according to the backlash, the growing number of negative reviews, and the current Steam user numbers, show that the product could be considered less marketable than the product that was originally advertised. The only discrepancy here would be the idea that the original claim is disingenuous, since the original creators were at the helm of the project at the time of crowdfunding and had currently been replaced by different project leaders and upper management. But let's move on to the second part of that question and talk about the biggest lie you could ever tell yourself. It's no secret that the people who are for censorship of Skullgirls are often being revealed as bad faith actors who are only making these statements to score an ideological win against the people who are upset about the censorship. Welcome to the internet. More often than not, these bad actors often claim that the characters are sexualized minors and the game is basically inappropriate pornography. But of course, they're glad that the changes have been made now because now they're comfortable with playing the game. Anyone who makes this claim should take a moment to reflect on this statement, considering the game has been on various platforms for multiple years with no legal incident. No one was arrested or jailed for the creation of this content in the game. These people who claim that this game featured sexually inappropriate depictions of minors have also claimed that they have had this game in their possession for years, since before they woke up one day and realized that they were participating in a trafficking of illicit content. Are you repentant, or are you just retarded? So in basically making these false claims and justifying a company's censorship, these people are partaking in enabling companies to infringe on the rights of consumers. Yet this is indeed an anti-consumer practice and needs to be called out as such, because eventually more people will grow to be tired of these practices and refuse to play these games, thus causing Future Club and Autumn Games to share the same fate of companies such as Daedalic Entertainment, the developers of the Lord of the Rings Gollum game. So I hope this answers your statement. I feel strongly about the situation because of what was done to both Alex and Mike Z, as well as the vandalism of the art of this game, some of which was fan art that was donated to the game for charity and fundraising purposes. An entire storyline featuring a character's origin story of being brutally beaten to death by his fellow corrupt policemen was altered because people were afraid of the racial implications, despite this being an homage to the 1989 film RoboCop. The black egrets armbands are removed because of symbolism tying that to the Nazi Party, despite people understanding that this is a fictional story and well-adjusted adults understand the difference between fiction and reality. Censorship is a problem not just because it stifles creativity and imagination. Censorship also shows that the people censoring things are incapable of handling topics they themselves are uncomfortable with, and that stifles cognitive development and also maturity. It's no wonder these people who are cheering on Future Club tend to be underaged and mentally underdeveloped. Thank you, and I'll see you next boss fight.